everybody. Yeah, I'm Paul. I lead the analytics team at Search Laboratory, and I just wanted to spend a bit of time now going through really a few of the reasons and the big differences about the new Google Analytics when we compare it to what we've been used to over the past few years. So I'll go through a little bit on how it works, how it's different and better, and how it works to solve a lot of these huge problems that we're faced with in the web and app data collection world these days. And I'll try and give you a few tips on how to get the most out of it as well. So to start with, I'm just going to retouch on a few of the things that Diggy has just mentioned. And it's probably worth just looking at where we are today with where we were, is it 2005 when Google Analytics was first conceived, the original version. So nowadays we're in a multi-device world really, which means people are accessing your businesses through websites and apps. You know, back in 2005, smartphones didn't exist, and apps certainly didn't. And also, people have access to many different PCs now. So, in addition to that, we've got this browser privacy initiative. So, browsers such as Apple and Safari have all got their initiatives to protect their users' privacy, which are a challenge for all web analytics platforms for things like ITP, I'm sure you've heard of, which delete first-party cookies. For 5 or so years now, we've not allowed third-party cookies. Google's doing that this year as well. And then on top of that, perhaps the biggest challenge of all is regulation and legislation, which Diggy's just gone through there. So we have to now get explicit consent to place a cookie, which underpins analytics as we've known it in the past. And there's legislations such as GDPR and the new Digital Markets Act. So yeah, we're in a very different world today, and what all that boils down to essentially is, well, there's a lot of problems and challenges, but there's two big ones. Missing data. So when you ask for consent, a lot of people, depending on how you ask for it, will say no. So you've got a big hole to start with. So what do we do with that? And the second major challenge is kind of attribution, really, and how we do that. So not only are we missing these touch points from things like the non-consented users and visitors, but we've got this lack of ability to join that true path up, really. So you can see on the screen here, we've got, you know, what could be one user. A couple of the touch points aren't tracked at all, and then 3 of the separate parts of the journey aren't joined together. So how do we attribute the sale at the end back to all those touch points successfully? And the answer is it's not easy, really, and that's what we've got to deal with. So on to Google Analytics 4, and so as Diggy's already mentioned, Google have re-engineered a solution that is aiming to tackle those big problems. And I'm just going to kind of go through a few of the major differences and point through really how it aims to do that. So first up really is kind of how it collects data. So in Universal Analytics, we collect page views, we collect events, and then there's a whole big processing piece that Google does, and it's what I call sessionizers into a session record and aggregates a load of metrics and dimensions at a session level. Everything in UA is effectively kind of session scoped, and this causes problems. I say problems, but it's there's a lot of processing involved, and it's a bit of a barrier to scalability and speed. You know, certainly some very big accounts struggled with speed in UA. So that's one of the big things. So GA4 is a completely re-engineering of how it collects data. It's got what I call an event-based schema. Everything you collect into GA4 is an event, and you know, it'll track the you know, you represent those events with parameters that describe them. So out of the box, you get the standard stuff you'd expect: page view, a screen view, but you also get quite a few other new events that are useful for those who don't work to do them themselves. But things like scroll and click tracking and various other things. In addition to that, there's a lot of common events that a lot of websites will track. For example, a purchase is a very common thing, obviously. And Google will recommend a set schema to track that, which gives familiarity in the tool. If you move from one company to the other, the purchase looks the same in both analytics accounts, as well as it allows Google to power certain reports and screens with common reports. But the real power, I suppose, in GA4 is it's a completely customizable framework, and this means you've got the flexibility and freedom to think about your business, your website, and design that event schema to show what you want to do, to show what happens on your website, not anybody else's. So if you, and as the example shows there, if you have a brochure download, you can create an event called brochure download, and you can add parameters in there that describe that event and allow you to report on your brochure download event. So that's one of the big benefits and powerful things really about the new GA4. So yeah, that gives us a huge amount of flexibility, and it allows you to fit it to your business. You know, for people that have got apps and websites, you can fit this common schema to work for both. Universal Analytics was very much designed for websites. GA4 is designed for your business. And in addition to that, the way it collects and returns data means it's much faster and much more scalable. So it'll cope a lot better with that. On top of those things, once you've made the mindset change of how it works and how to access data, it's a little bit easier to understand. Cheers, thank you. It's a little bit easier to implement. It's very simple and straightforward. And once you understand how it works, it's easier to do certain types of analysis. So yeah, a few little tips and a bit of advice really, because it's a customizable framework and not like stick it on and you've got what you're given. There's a big important role of making sure you design that schema so how you fit that to your business or website or app. So you need to set about with that. Don't let, you know, Tom in marketing and Fred in one of your agencies ask for things and design that framework and schema for you. It needs to be documented so everyone knows what's going on. And the biggest thing really is to make sure you put a bit of ownership and governance in everybody's businesses, because without that, you do get Tom in marketing and Fred in an agency adding things and asking for things, and it needs to be controlled really. So big tip and a big change, because UA didn't suffer from the same problems that GA4 might do if you don't do this. So next point, property architecture. So Universal had this concept of a web property really, where you generally track your web data into one property, app data into another. And this creates this siloed kind of sets of data, which makes it hard to cross-analyze people that use both, as an example. Harder to report on, and you've got the facility to create views, a subset of those properties, but this again creates quite a bit of processing and aggregation. So GA4 is a kind of simplified architecture in effect, and the whole idea is you create one property for one customer or user base, and that means if you've got an app and a website that has the same customer base, you put all that data into the same property, and when it sits in that same kind of silo, you can understand and access that and report on your users and not your website and your app separately. So yeah, that's it. In addition to that, you have got the facility, if you get the 360 version, to create roll-ups. If you've got different, different brands within a business with different customer bases, you can roll those up or create sub-properties for your app and your website if you need that. So yeah, just to go over that, you know, having this single property architecture allows you to do analysis across the full user's customer journey. It gives you a global view because you've got a common schema that you can report on in a more simplified way. And you also get this familiarity across the business with that common schema really, because it's all in one property and it's one shared schema. So next point, reporting identity. And what I mean by reporting identity is the ID that it uses to join all these events and everything that it collects really. So Universal has always used this concept of a client ID or a device ID that it would create when you visit the website, stores it in a cookie. And that cookie is very fragile, as we know today. That's if you're allowed to place it in the first place. Yeah, so that cookie is not durable. So if people are accessing your website across different devices, different browsers in the same device, or an app or a website, they've all got a different ID that's joining that activity together. You've got these browser frameworks that are, basically not letting you place certain cookies. ITP and Safari will delete that cookie after 7 days, which makes it very hard to track a customer over a long period of time. How do you deal with that problem? Yeah, it effectively means that your users metric in Universal or similar tools that use that method are very not really fit for purpose, I would say. So GA4 has got a new concept, well, not a new concept, but it's got the ability, if you have a logged in authenticated system or website, you've got the option to output your customer's CRM user ID into the tracking code, which is going to last for the lifetime of your customer and your CRM. And this is very durable over time because it'll use that to join all the dots over potentially many, many years. So yeah, it gives you a more accurate user metric, and just as importantly, it gives you, I suppose, the ability to create very long-term audiences. So the audience doesn't fall away when a cookie gets deleted. It sticks with that user. Of course, it does require authentication, and you don't need to have an authenticated logged-in solution to get a lot of the benefits out of GA4. So next on is user properties, and we're going to be talking quite a lot later in today's session about how we use GA to understand your customers and activate against your customers and potential customers. And an underpinning feature of GA4 is the concept of user property or user dimension, as you may have heard of it. And yeah, the whole concept is you can set a user property against a user when they perform an action or an event on the website. So the example on the screen is if they log in, you can set a custom dimension, a user custom dimension against that user. And when they keep carrying on navigating around the site or come back the next week, that dimension is available for analysis, reporting, adding people to audiences. Now, the problem with that is Universal just uses this client ID. So if you access on a different device, a different browser, or in an app, it's a different ID. So that user dimension will not get passed on and persist. So GA4, because it uses user ID, or it can use user ID to join everybody up, those user properties, which are very important and useful, can persist, over the lifetime of your customer relationship with that person, and when they access the website on different devices or in apps. So yeah, a few tips on, because this user ID feature is such a powerful thing, we need to make the most of it effectively. And a few things we would kind of advise and recommend people look into are, first and foremost, trying to incentivize and encouraging people to log in, because if they don't do that, you can't output this ID. When they do log in, kind of trying to persist that login as long as you can, really. And there's a whole legal kind of questions around how you do this, and your privacy policy needs to be strong enough and tell your customers. But yeah, there's this concept of a soft login. So when you come back the following day or the week after, if your privacy policy has got permission from your customers to keep outputting that ID, you're not going to be able to go and look at your address or update your credit card details, but you've got permission to output the ID to track those users and maybe personalize your website and so on. there's a similar concept of performing a soft login if someone visits from an email. Again, privacy policy needs to be clearer on what it's doing. But technically, you could do that by sending someone an email and they click on a link. And another big difference is in GA4 is the facility for attribution. Now, attributions, no attribution model is correct or fully, tells a full picture. But what we're getting universal now is, I suppose, just not fit for purpose in 2024. So it uses this last non-touch attribution model. And apart from the fact it doesn't, it wouldn't give any credit in the standard reports, this is to previous touch points. A lot of those touch points we don't track anyway because it won't track those non-consented visits. So yeah, I suppose the method of attribution in GA4 is just not fit for purpose in today's age. So with GA4, you get a data-driven attribution model that's got an updated kind of DDA methodology, improved on the one you get in the modeling tool within Universal Analytics, with things like a time decay element, so it'll give more credit to more recent touch points. And Alice will touch on modeling and attribution in a bit more detail later. But the whole idea is the attribution in GA4 aims to stitch together these missing touch points and disjointed touch points. So yeah, just a few points on that. This is now a property level setting, so you can change that within the property and not be told what you're doing by Google. It's available throughout all of those different reports. And it applies kind of across device and applies modeling to what it gives you. And last couple of bits before I hand over to David briefly. The next big thing is, obviously we've talked about it already, missing data. If you use a cookie tool to get consent, you're going to miss a huge chunk. You track X% and you don't track Y% as it stands. And the big problem is you don't know what X and Y are. I've seen between 10 and 20%, 10 and 70% of data lost, depending how you go about asking for that consent. But you don't know what that is. And the way people have traditionally dealt with this problem is by kind of knowing you've sold 100 things and seeing 80 things, and you uplift everything in GA, and it's far from ideal. X and Y on this slide will be changing constantly over time, and it will be very different for different channels. Your paid search from your paid brand, from your display campaigns, it will all be different. So it's very hard to evaluate that. So there's a tool called Google Consent Mode, which some of you may have heard of. It's a feature of Google Tag Manager. And the whole concept behind it is it communicates a signal into Google Tag Manager, which will then adjust the behavior of your tags, your Google tags, I should say, based on the consent choices of your users. So if as we all want, your users say, yes, you can track me, you can place a cookie, it will write and read a cookie just like it always has done. And it'll send that event with all the data as you've configured. Nothing really is too different to what you would do normally or you used to do. It does now mark that as a consented hit, so Google stores that kind of separately in a different kind of set of data or partition, however you term it. But the clever bit is where some of those customers are saying, no, you can't place a cookie or on that first page before they do anything. And the clever bit really is Google Tag Manager will alter the behavior of those Google tags, so it does not place or read a cookie. So from a cookie point of view, you will be compliant. And it still sends, so it still tracks you and still sends this data. So you're still seeing all these events. The difference is the ID, it doesn't use this ID to join people together. It just knows. you've had 20 non-consented purchases and X page views and so on. And it marks those events as non-consented and, effectively and stores them separately. So what Google will then do is it can use that, and it kind of uses this observed or consented data set and applies modeling to the rest of the data that you've got. And as I said before, Alice will touch in a bit more detail, but the whole concept is it aims to fill in the gaps. So if you've sold 100 things, you're more likely to see a number that is more true of what's actually happened, and it applies that to the attribution paths and so on. So yeah, just a quick summary on those key differences. There's a lot of differences, but there's the key ones I've touched on and how they tackle the challenges that we're up against these days. It's more scalable, it's faster in how it works. It's a customizable framework, so there's a bit of onus to set it up how you want it. It's designed, this common schema is designed to work across different platforms, apps and websites. And the big thing is it aims to fill in the missing data and attribute in a better way, really.